SaaS Therapy.
Welcome, everyone, to SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Casey Trujillo. And we have a very special guest today who we are super pumped to interview, Ashley DeKerlegand from Quickbase. We are so glad you're here, Ashley. So before we jump in, we always like to make sure the audience knows you. So Ashley DeKerlegand is a senior manager of customer education at Quickbase, a leading cloud platform for building low-code applications. She's responsible for designing and delivering engaging and effective learning experience for Quickbase customers. Ashley has over 10 years of experience in the education services industry, working with various software solutions and technologies, both as a trainer and training manager. Ashley is passionate about helping customers achieve their goals and solve their challenges through learning and development. She holds a bachelor's degree in Spanish language and literature from the University of Virginia and a master's degree in instructional design from St. Leo University. Ashley, welcome to SaaS Therapy.
Thank you for having me.
I've got to ask you, did we miss anything in that intro? That's always really important.
No, that's it. I think you've got it covered.
Well, Ashley, I get the fun part of getting to know you a little bit better. So we have a little game that we start with. It's simple.
Okay.
It's 5 quick questions. You don't need to expand much on your answers. It's way okay not to. And this allows the audience to get to know you a little bit. And I just like to begin before we start is I actually have heard Ashley speak at a conference, and she was phenomenal. Like, you're getting in for a treat, everyone, today to hear her passion about what she's trying to accomplish. So let's get started, Ashley. Let's get to know you. If you could have a lifetime supply of pizza or a lifetime supply of tacos, which would you choose?
Oh, tacos, definitely.
That was
No question.
You didn't even think about what taco is it? An al pastor? Is it carne asada? What are you going with?
Oh, actually, I prefer veggie tacos, even though I do eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian, but I like black bean tacos.
There it is. All right, fantastic. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl, for sure.
Okay. Okay. If we were to put you onto a show and it could either be a rap battle or a dance off, which one would you be better at?
Oh, gosh. A dance off, but
All right.
really, I'd prefer neither of those.
Would you rather watch cat or dog memes?
Dog, for sure.
Oh, all right. Fantastic. You have a dog?
I have two dogs.
Oh,
Always had
geez, look at
dogs.
you.
I've
Look
had
at you
one
being
cat,
adventurous.
but that wasn't a
And
great experience. So
favorite breed of a dog is? Do you have one that's your favorite?
a rescue, really. So
Aw.
right now I have a Corgi mixed with German Shepherd that I'm looking at right now, and she's staring back at me, and that's been my favorite mixture of rescue.
Fantastic. When talking about a disagreement with a family member, now I'm saying a family member, would you rather text or talk over the phone about that disagreement?
A family member. Is this extended family or immediate?
We'll go
Ex-
immediate.
Immediate on the phone or face
All
to
right,
face.
fantastic.
Extended, let's keep it to text.
All right. Ashley, thank you for allowing us to play that game to get to know you a little bit better. I feel like I know everything about you now, and I'm excited to see that next dance video with dogs in the background
Oh,
helping
God.
me out. So that's awesome.
Yep. That'll be part two. Well,
Oh, God,
Ashley,
please no.
a lot of times, Casey and I have had the opportunity to interview people whose primary background comes more from sales or from client success. And, one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you today is because while you work in client success in large regard, you have a background in instructional design and learning. And so one of the places that I thought would be really interesting to start today would be what would you say are the things that L&D people miss when it comes to working in SaaS? Meaning there's kind of a traditional approach that people take to learning and development. And what about that doesn't work in the SaaS world?
Yeah, I would say most of my experiences, and especially since becoming a manager and hiring, I'm seeing most people that apply for the instructional design positions and training positions where they're also creating content. Um, they are very traditional in nature as far as using the ADDIE model. And that really just doesn't work with SaaS. I started out in my education in the manufacturing industry, but in education, and we had quarterly product releases. Now at Quickbase, we have monthly product releases, so it's even harder to keep up with all the content. But ADDIE just does not work. So we were using a platform for project management, and we would have about 65 tasks that would need to be completed going along with the ADDIE model. We've now knocked that down to about 13 tasks, I think is what we have, because now we're using successive approximation or just rapid prototyping in general. And that definitely works much more seamlessly, and we can get content out the door rapidly and then be able to update that content more rapidly as well.
Okay, Ashley, this is why I'm part of the podcast, is you and Todd are geeking out about this stuff. And
Okay.
70% of what you just said was Spanish to me. So I need you to find out those terms for the audience, and then just maybe make it a little bit simpler for someone like me to understand why that is not working. I have an idea of what you were saying, but I'd like just to be a little bit more clear on it.
Listen, Ashley, the fact of the matter is we want people to know that Casey doesn't know stuff. That's important.
So. Okay. So I do think, and I found this with my graduate school program with instructional design, I noticed that L&D still caters very much to like K through 12 curriculums or military training curriculums. That was one of the first e-learning programs that came out, was in the military. And those curriculums don't change for years, decades even. I even noticed with my 4-year-old that when we were learning the alphabet, it was like A for abacus and like words that, who plays with an abacus anymore? So, even those curriculums are very outdated for children. So it would make sense that the SaaS companies that are constantly changing monthly, quarterly, we're not going to be able to keep up with that by using these old, outdated, traditional instructional design models versus rapid prototyping.
So as someone who has been in the L&D world for a long time, but someone who did not go do a master's in instructional design, that is, I guess it's not surprising for me to hear that, Ashley, that so much of it is driven around K-12 and military instruction. But wow, that is, it's wild to think that, the traditional approach was designed to say you have to make something that's going to live and last for decades. And it has to be something that could just be reproduced over and over and over again in the same format. But technology changes too quickly. That to me is at least what I'm hearing, is that the traditional approach is built to make stuff that is supposed to last and not change very often. And you are realizing now, having worked in SaaS, that it's like, well, that doesn't work. I have to build something that is going to be flexible and can change frequently. What do you think from the perspective of, not only are there these outdated frameworks and models for creating or designing your experiences, but one of the things that was interesting to me, at least when I first met you, the standard in the L&D world is oftentimes built around SCORM too. And I'd be curious, after working in technology, how has your perception on SCORM changed over the years?
That is such a foundation of instructional design. It's one of the first things that I learned, when I was using a learning management system at my last company. It's one of the first, acronyms that I learned in graduate school. And so I always thought that was, the foundation for everything that needed to be constructed. And so I was only looking for content authoring tools that supported SCORM content, or even XAPI. I did start diving into that, but I'm still finding, similarities between SCORM and XAPI. I've had nothing but issues really using SCORM files. So, having those exported out of the content authoring system and then put into our learning management system, there's a lot of content that's lost in translation, such as like course completions. I've had a lot of issues where people can get through half the course and then they drop out, which it's only showing that they haven't completed the course. So it'll say 0% or 100%, and it doesn't show me where they dropped off. The biggest thing that I find with SCORM is that those really aren't made for micro learnings. Most SCORM content is built around, simulations, or they're built around these long courses that really don't cater to micro learnings. So if someone wants to just go find out, I'm going to use a Quickbase term here, but about grid editing, and they don't want to learn the whole history of grid editing in Quickbase. They just want to know how to grid edit, or why do I need to use it? They shouldn't have to go back through an hour-long SCORM course. They should just be able to go and find a job aid or some sort of micro-learning that's modular, but also reusable in other skill paths.
Ashley, this sounds, like Todd said, a little crazy talk. Are you unique in this perspective? Are you seeing something that's coming and that people in your industry are recognizing, but they don't want to do anything about it? Like, is this chatter that's happening right now? Are people having this discussion?
So it's strange because I have never, and I said this the other day during our kickoff, our customer success kickoff. I said on Friday that I had counted up the number of learning management systems I've used with, all with SCORM files, and it's been 12 over the course of my career, and I've never liked a single one. And last year, I was just trying to figure out, like, I'm seeing where people in our industry are complaining and saying nobody likes their LMS system, nobody likes SCORM content. There's constant issues with it. And I found this article written by Maria Manning Chapman from TSIA, and she wrote "In Search of the Red Feather: Why No One Likes Their Learning Management System." She didn't explicitly say, that there's another alternative we can go to, but it was really just pointing out that people are over investing in learning management systems due to their dissatisfaction with it, and with content authoring tools that take a long time to create, or you have to have like this crazy high technical knowledge to know how to make these software simulations with branching scenarios. And so that was really the first article or anything that I'd read that kind of acknowledged that, hey, what we're doing really isn't working for the SaaS industry. And then I just started looking outside of learning management systems.
Ashley, I think it's really fascinating because at least one of the things that's challenging, I think, for so many people in the L&D world is trying to determine, what does success look like? And at least, in my experience, a lot of times the people I speak with, they focus very heavily on the one thing that they can see, right? So you go back to your example around SCORM, which is, did a user go in and complete the course? And, that course may have been super long and irrelevant to what the user needed, but that's kind of the only thing that you have to go on. And now that you've worked in SaaS for a little while and you think about the ultimate measure of success and what you want it to look like, how do you determine, what would you say is a better way to think about, are we winning? Is the learning that we're providing helping both our customers and our organization to succeed?
Yeah, that's another thing, is like looking at metrics with LMS systems and SCORM files. Is I hear a lot of people that have been in customer education or L&D in general saying, well, we had all these course enrollments and these course completions. And I just keep thinking to myself, well, I don't care about course enrollments or completions. I care about adoption and customer satisfaction. And did we meet their expectations? And I had recently just watched this TED Talk on YouTube with Louis von Ahn. He created Duolingo, and which is such a cool app. I use it to try to brush up on my Spanish. Still can't speak fluently in Spanish, but he was saying, I don't want people to be addicted to our learning platform, and we don't want to go in there and look at how many hours did people spend in our learning management system or on our learning platform? We want them to get what they need and then go apply it. So we want them to adopt the product, get in to our learning system when you need it for a moment of need, and then get out and go and actually apply that knowledge to the software that you're learning.
Actually, I love that. I think that's one of the things that I've always felt really matters a lot with technology. The goal shouldn't be to consume learning. The goal should be to help the user to accomplish the goal that they want with that technology, whether that's learning another language or learning how to pull some magical insight out so they look awesome in front of their boss, or saving time when they're trying to, go and deliver a product, whatever that might be. And it's really hard, I think, in L&D because the background is so much heavily focused on, can I get you to consume a lot? Can I get you to learn a lot? And, learning and changing behavior aren't the same. This might be a hard question to ask, but I'd be curious, how can we change that? Like, I'm not sure I know the answer, and it might be a hard one to answer on the fly, but I'd be curious, what was it going to take to help change that perception and that perspective for so many L&D professionals?
So the biggest piece of leverage that I've used is just asking the customer. And so many of us are afraid to ask the customer what they want out of our learning platform. I've always been afraid to do that. I even used to be afraid to send out surveys in class that were anonymously responded to, because I'm like, I don't want to get any negative feedback. I've told my trainers, I went in and I changed up our survey when I first started at Quickbase, and my trainers got very nervous because it wasn't just your standard like NPS score and are people, did you like training? Would you recommend it? It was changed up. Actually, I used Dr. Tallheimer. He created this performance-focused smile sheet survey. And it's really more of like job transfer, meeting your expectations. Are you motivated now? But I always go into customer meetings, and I really appreciate my CSMs that invite me into customer meetings and check-ins with them, because my favorite thing to do now is go in and ask customers, what do you not like about what we're doing with learning? And some of them have even like kind of laughed, and they're like, oh, wow. Like normally just, even if we get good feedback, I tell them, even with our largest customers, I'm like, thank you for the great feedback. I love great feedback, but what would you want to see? Like, what else can we do that we're not doing right now? And that has really, I think that that's going to be the biggest driver of change, because that's where I've gotten all of the feedback that I need in order to push micro learning and e-learning, and for people to realize in the education industry that learning is, for most of our customers who have very limited time and resources, learning is a moment of need, and it's not a moment in time. It's something that they may need to keep going back to, but it shouldn't be, hey, let's look at our session time. Oh, this person spent 2 hours today in our learning platform. To me, that's kind of alarming if they spent that long in there, because that's telling me maybe they didn't learn what they needed to. I want somebody to be able to go into our learning platform and learn something in a few minutes, jump out, go try it in our software, and see if, we can measure it that way.
Okay, Todd, we said that Ashley was going to be awesome, but this is unbelievable. And it's contrary to what most people think about. So, Ashley, how did you partner with CS to accomplish this? Because again, Todd and I have been doing this for some time, and it seems like CS is on one side of the fence, learning's on the other side of the fence, and they usually fight about, hey, I produce great content, customers just never know about it. The CS team says, hey, yeah, you have great content, but it's always outdated because it's not what our customers need. So one, how did you team up with CS to accomplish this? And then two, I'd love for you to give a little bit of insight. Are you meeting with the customer like once every 2 weeks? Like how much time are you spending in the voice of the customer? So if you wouldn't mind answering those two questions. First, how did you team up with CS to do this? And then two, how much time are you spending in finding that voice of the customer?
So many CSMs, they're afraid to get any negative feedback. Obviously, I think we all are. None of us really want to hear negative feedback, but I just started, as my boss would say, socializing, the concept of like, hey, what if, could I start sitting in on some customer meetings and kickoffs and trying to find ways that we can improve our training? And Quickbase is the most customer-centric company that I've worked for. So I've been very grateful for, many of the CSMs. There's been a few of them who immediately jumped on board with me, and they started bringing me into their customer meetings. And they then started to discuss it during their CSM meetings. And then so more and more CSMs started bringing me into it because they were hearing great feedback from their customers, saying like, hey, really appreciate, the transparency and pulling someone
That's
in
awesome.
from education to hear, how we think we can make it better. I was just having this conversation with one of our tech support managers the other day, because it's the same type of, it's not just education. We want to make sure that the engagements that we have with our customers are valuable every time. And if someone's reaching out to tech support, we're sending out the same survey that we do with education. Or that we did
Mm.
with my education department. It was, okay, how was that interaction? Was it great? Did we help you? Yeah, you did. But what I would like to see in a survey for tech support, at least, is like, what could we have done so that you didn't need to reach out to us? So it's always seeing how we could do it better, and getting those customer objections or constructive criticism, I would say.
Ashley, I think that's so good. One of the things that is, Casey kind of alluded to the fact that in a lot of the organizations that we work with, support or implementation and client success, a lot of times they're all like part of the same department, but they all kind of work in their own little siloed way. And they don't think about how they're going to work more closely together to drive success for the customer. I heard two things there that I wanted to just really highlight that I thought were really profound. One was the fact that if you want to get L&D and customer success working together, or if you're an L&D professional and you want to get more time with customers, you need to be able to provide value to the customer. So when you're on the phone with a client success manager, if you get some quick wins, they'll be more likely to trust you and engage with you in the future. So that's the first thing that stuck out. But I also loved the fact that you're mentioning that we should be looking at like the entire part of that customer journey. It's not just like, did they receive training at that moment at the beginning that they needed to have it? And it's not just, did they let you come in on a regular cadence call with a CSM, but any interaction they have, even if it's in support, are we focusing on how we can help the customer get better results faster with less pain and less friction in that whole entire journey?
Well done, Todd Kirk AI. I love
That's
it.
become a running
Ashley,
joke.
would you?
Apparently, I'm the guy who tries to restate everything and like summarize this Todd bot. So
Summarize that, Todd.
Todd bot, I love that.
Ashley, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the survey questions that you would ask? So let's say I'm one of your larger Quickbase customers. A CS person got you on the phone. You're meeting with that person. What are some of the questions that you're asking? I know what you said is how can we improve, but are there specific questions that you're asking? Do you have 2 or 3 sample questions you might give the audience today?
Sure. And again, these are all from Dr. Tallheimer, so I cannot take credit for them. One of the most helpful ones that we use now instead of an NPS score is we say, how effective was the training and would you recommend it? Instead of using your standard Likert scale, like of just 1 to 5, people tend, if they like it, they may go all the way up to 5. If they don't, 1, and then 3 kind of, they don't really know. There's just a lot of gray area with the numbering system. So what I do is every response can be, instead of numbers, it's actual sentences, like, the training was a complete waste of time, or this training was very effective and I would highly recommend it. And then in the middle, it was somewhat effective. I would only recommend it, but you would need to make some updates or improvements to it. So people seem to have, when it's much more defined rather than just by using your standard Likert scale, then that definitely helps. And then, definitely like having open-ended questions. What part of the learning experience was the most beneficial to you? And then do you have suggestions to improve the training? That's where we get some of our best responses from, and that's how we iterate our content. There's also one that I have found to be very useful that I'd never used before. And it's, how able are you to put what you've learned into practice in your work? And that
Love that.
really shows a desire to, like, how motivated are you essentially? Because it's not just about learning the material, it's about being able to transfer it and having like that behavioral change of being motivated to do it. And so we've seen where people have said, our responses are like, I can be successful now in using what I learned with some guidance or without guidance, or I can perform at an expert level. But one of those responses that I've included in there is that my current work role does not enable me to use what I learned, and my current Quickbase permissions don't enable me to use what I
Genius.
learned. that really helps because now I'm able to give that information to the CSMs who can then go back to their managers or their point of contact, and they can tell them, not only does it kind of cover us because it lets us know that, hey, we did a great job teaching, but your manager is not really supporting you, or your company is not giving you the resources to be able to use what you've learned. And we all know about the forgetting curve where you forget immediately after training. So if they're not able to transfer that knowledge right to the job immediately, then they're going to forget everything that they just learned. So that's been really helping us to close a communication gap between customers.
Oh, so good.
Oh, that is so good. Ashley, I'm interested on your follow-up when you said, what else could you improve upon? You talked about content. Sometimes you can be outdated because of the time it takes to actually plan something out in the previous ways you've done it. You've talked about that most people don't really love their LMS, so that's the platform to deliver the content. But then you just said something new, and I've heard you speak about this, is sometimes you're the middle person with all the data. So you just said that right there is like, okay, we get the data back. It says, hey, the manager is having the issue. You got to then give it to the CS. The CS then has to go give it to their point of contact. Is that another thing that you're finding is in learning and development, you either have too much information and the customer has no information, or you ask the customer to send out a survey and then they hold the information and then you don't have the information? You've talked a little bit about that. Explain that a little bit more to our audience, what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's up there, like with maybe the top 5 things I don't like about LMSs out of like 50 things. But it's creating so much additional work for myself and then my training coordinator to have to, every time that our customer wants to see, well, who attended these classes, how much time have they spent in the learning platform, or which courses have they completed, anytime that they even want to see like certifications. Then we have to then go and look in the system, export them all to Excel files, and then send them over. Of course, we can set up like pipelines from Quickbase and integrations and do all of these things, but that costs additional money, particularly, every system you want to integrate with, typically in an LMS, you get nickel and dime to death. So we don't, we only have 1 or 2 integrations right now. That's one thing that I'm really confused about. And when I started looking at other LMSs, it's always a question to me like, hey, how is there a way for us to provide transparency to each customer, but also make it private to that customer? And, LMS systems are like I want to give my customer admin rights in our learning management system, and all of the CSMs I've ever spoken with about a learning management or from a learning management system company have been like, oh, why would you want to do that? You don't want them to see anything negative about your platform or, their course completions or their feedback. You want to be able to, kind of gatekeep that information, then decide what you send along. And I'm like, well, that's pretty, that I just don't understand why we wouldn't be more transparent with the customer. And that goes again back to, the need to build trust with our customer base by being transparent.
Ashley, okay. So I'm going to do the Todd bot thing again, because I don't know how else to do it, but I just love that so much.
Todd bot.
There's a couple of things that really stuck out to me there again, which is, when you were talking about the questions that you ask, so often I think the mindset of L&D professionals is to ask questions that are going to make them look good, right? We're way more worried about the perception that we did a good job rather than the reality of if we did a really good job. So I love the fact that you're like, well, let's ask questions that are going to be actionable and that are going to teach us things that are going to help us know what to do. And then there's a second half of this is, can we work in partnership with our customers in that journey by providing them with the right data and the right insights? One of the things that you mentioned that really stuck out to me was this idea of measuring motivation. A lot of the studies that I've looked at over the years, when it comes to adoption of technology, the greatest predictor is intentionality. Meaning, if I intend to do something, that's the greatest predictor of whether or not I'm actually going to do something, which, it makes sense, right? If I intend to drink a glass of water, I'm more likely to drink a glass of water than if I don't. And so the thing is of like measuring that motivation and that desire of the customer to actually change their behavior is really powerful. And so being able to ask questions that are going to help you understand the likelihood that they're going to get the results that they want, and actually find out what the blockers are that are preventing them from getting the results that they want. And then finally, providing all that visibility and all that power back into the hands of the customer so that they can participate with you in ensuring that they get the things that they want. That's a pretty revolutionary idea that I don't see a lot of organizations actually trying to do today.
Yeah, and I still think that we're really hung up most SaaS companies are still very hung up on, this idea of training on features versus like training how to solve a customer's problems. And I'm guilty of that. It's, when I was a product trainer in my previous job, I did a lot of face-to-face training. So I traveled all over and I got to interact with customers directly, which I still think is just one of the most valuable ways to learn. But it, I remember, in every single class that I would start, live training class, I would come in with the history of our software, and I'd go through all of these things that the customer didn't care about. And finally one day, this student, we were out to lunch, and he said, "Hey, if you cut out like that first 10 minutes of stuff that we just don't care about." He was like, "No offense, like, I think your company's great, the product's great, but like I don't care about it. I'm not going to walk away, really caring about the origin of your software and who invented it." And I was like, "Oh, okay," like hurt my feelings a little bit, but then it did make me realize, wow, I really need to be interacting more with the customer and finding out like what they don't like about what I'm doing. And so that kind of set off this, um, using like focus groups and interviews and just casual conversation with people about what we can do to improve. And I have realized too, I try to implement and into every single training that we do. I try to make sure that both of our instructional designers and our trainers, I always tell them to start with, and I'm going to nerd out again, but I'll tell you about what it means. The ARCS model of motivation by John Keller. It's one of the best theories of learning that I got from grad school. And ARCS just simply stands for attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So every time that you approach a new subject, and I always say this, a new problem that we need to help the customer solve, approach it by gaining the customer's attention, making it relevant to them, giving them the confidence that they can do this, and then allowing them to have the satisfaction that they were able to learn this and that they're able to transfer it to the job. So celebrating their business outcomes, essentially.
Well, and I love that because I think, it goes back to your point you said at the beginning. If the customer can get that, if you can get their attention, make it relevant, give them confidence and satisfaction, and that happens in the first like 3 to 5 minutes of your training with them, who cares if they go and watch the other hour, especially if they're at the end, they're going to go in and now they've gone into the software and they start building and they start making it and they, figure it out all on their own. That should count as a win in your mind. Like, who cares if they watched your 2 hours worth of training, if they actually got the outcome that they wanted.
Right. And I did recently have a conversation with some people in product about, I've been incorporating, we've been adding all of these micro learning videos that include change management. And we have our new, every company is incorporating Gen AI into their software. It's like the big, it's like the space race to have AI included in your software. I love AI. It's helped me be way more efficient. But a lot of customers, and not even just customers, but coworkers, my husband, my dad, like I try to talk to them about AI, and my husband just says like, I'm just nerdy. But it's about change management too. So we can't only be creating training, showing people how to use our Gen AI feature. We have to look at all of the objections that people have to using AI and then changing their mind about it. Like one of the biggest objections I'm seeing is, oh, AI is going to take our jobs, So I'm creating a video on, and this is where the element, there's elements of marketing that are involved with education and L&D. And it's not just for customers, but internally as well. It's, let me make a video about that objection. Like, no, it's not going to take your job, but you do need to be using it because it will be making you more efficient and it will give you a career advantage. So if we look at it from that lens, then I think that, and just realize that what we're doing is not just product training. It's also about change management and helping people be successful and changing their minds, because change is hard.
Ashley, you need no validation, but I want to give you some validation. you're a disruptor in how you're thinking about this, and that's the goal of SaaS therapy. We don't want to placate to everybody and just say continue doing the same thing you've always done. Again, the market's telling us, the customers are telling us, hey, I want something different, and are we willing to change from tradition and actually look at this? So this was fascinating. I think you'll enjoy this story. We were meeting with a head of customer success, and he was walking through education, and we said, so how was your university that you had? What was the numbers like? He's like, oh, it was so successful. We had like 10 to 20,000 users. And we go, oh, okay. Now, could you compare that to total licensed users? And he said, oh, we have about 70 million licensed users.
Oh dear.
So the point I want to validate for you is yes, the information that is usually being produced is pretty fantastic, but it's usually out of date. If it is up to date, it's only about features and not the benefits that people are looking for. And I think the data is speaking for itself. And that's the validation I want to give you. I rarely speak to any SaaS organization when I'm doing consulting that they go, yeah, we have 10% of our user base, 20% of our user base. I've never heard anyone even say close to 30%. And it's like all those users are not being made aware to find this discovery of, wow, this is just fantastic to me. So Ashley, if you were talking to someone out there today that wanted to consider, okay, I do want to take some of this advice that Ashley's given to me, where do they start? It could be overwhelming to say, gosh, I've only done SCORM, I've only done this, I only know this way. Would it be just doing some surveys and just asking your customers? Like what are some of the thoughts on where you would begin?
I would say maybe for them to do some inner reflection and then think about how they feel every time they need to learn a new software. Like we did this in our kickoff meeting the other day. I counted up how many different software platforms our CSMs use, and on average, there were about 24. So every day we're using 24, or well, not every day, but maybe let's say monthly. Okay. So maybe some softwares like, and I'm including things like Microsoft Outlook and Excel and Power BI and things like that. So some of those, Outlook is pretty simple to use. You use that every single day. Power BI I may use weekly, whereas there may be something else I'm using monthly. But then, how do you feel when you hear that we're about to implement a new software into that tech stack that we use as our customer, as us being a customer of all these platforms? And I know that the last 3 softwares that we have purchased as a company that we've implemented, when I look at those logos, I just go, oh, I don't want people to feel that way about Quickbase. I think that we need to empathize with the customer because we're also customers. And I think that that's one of the most important things. And look at how do you not just prefer how to learn, but what do you have time to learn? So like I find myself many times when I'm using like the recent content authoring tool that we were using, I find myself not even using their learning platform because I can go to YouTube, or even I see people that are using their platform and they're creating TikTok videos. So I can go and get what I need in 30 seconds rather than having to go look through, and they are using SCORM content rather than me having to go and look through an entire like 2-hour course. And also just thinking about, again, back to where learning is not, and especially with SaaS, is not just a moment in time. You have moments of need, but you always need to go back. Like you may need that moment 50 times over the course of your career. And the best story example that I can think of is back when I used to work at the shipyard. And yes, I did work at a shipyard. I went through an apprentice school, which is like one of the best ways to become educated on something, by the way. But I had to convert fractions to inches or vice versa for when I was working with machinists. And I didn't want to, I had sat in on some courses that were, took me several weeks learning about blueprints and converting fractions and things like that. And I'm not like a math whiz. So I'd go out on the job and I didn't want to be embarrassed with all of these people who had been working at the shipyard for like 30, 40 years. And I was one of the only women. And this young machinist, he had showed me one day that he had this little job aid that was attached to his lanyard, and it had all of the fractions converted over to inches. And every time that I needed that, I then used, I would just pick it up and look at it. Sometimes I didn't want the machinist to know that I still didn't know what the conversions were. So I would just kind of take it and look at it down, down next to my leg. But over the 3.5 years that I worked there, I needed that almost weekly because I can't, for some reason, my brain just does not allow me to convert fractions to inches. And so, not only just providing learning as a moment in one time that they're never going to need to go back to, but allowing resources that people can go back to continuously and not have to go search for, 10 minutes to try to find something.
Ashley, that's amazing. I think really what it sounds like we need to all remember is that learning is more important than ever. But it comes down to, are we focusing on the right delivery the right delivery mechanisms, the right formats, the right structures to help people to ultimately do their job and to do their job more effectively and to solve the problems that they have. It's so good. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I know that we're getting near the end of time of what we have today. So I want to ask you one more question, which I think is really important for Casey and I. The goal of this podcast is to be therapy, and every good therapy session walks away with homework. And so if you could give our audience one piece of homework that they could take back to their own organizations, what would it be?
Well, I'm a huge book nerd. I love reading, so my homework is always reading. So there's 2 books that I think are some of the best books if you're trying to learn how to be more empathetic with customer training design or just internal design. One of them is Action Mapping with Kathy Moore. And it's a very, very long book, but she does have job aids on her website. It's actually a great read, and it really addresses training and solving the customer's your learner's problem, not necessarily the customer. And then another book is called Design Thinking for Training and Development, or Design Thinking for Learning and Development. It's by Sharon Bowler and another author. And I had actually reached out to this woman that I had watched her YouTube videos. She'd worked for Facebook, Intelum. She now owns her own company called ADDIE. Her name's Vicki Kennedy. I reached out to her while I was applying for jobs because she just impressed me so much. She was so forward thinking. And I asked her what books she would recommend that I read, being a customer education, like trying to be, in a senior manager in a customer education field. And the Design Thinking book is what she read. And I use it every single day in my training design. My dog apparently doesn't like that book, but
or he really likes it. I'm not really sure. Either way. So, Ashley, that's awesome. I'm pumped to add those both to my list. I think that'll be great. I hope everyone here has enjoyed listening to you as much as Casey and I have enjoyed talking with you. Everyone, thank you for coming to this episode of SaaS Therapy, and we hope you go out and learn how you can better support your customers in the future. So thank you again for coming today, Ashley.
Thank you.